Hey everybody, this is Longhorn Confidential. This is Danny Davis, the Office of American-Statesman. It's time to talk football. It's been a long off season. We've been waiting for this one for a long time. Texas, Ohio State. So who better to bring on than one of the Ohio State beat writers, a guy who covers the team, Stephen Means with Cleveland.com, Ohio State beat writer, also hosts of the Buckeye Talk podcast. Stephen, thanks for joining me today.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me.
I got to also add, proud graduate of Kent State University, the pride of
Yeah.
the Golden Eagles. Some Texas fans would be interested in that because Haley Eckerman's the volleyball coach up there, the one of the greatest all-time volleyball players over at Texas. So little connection we got there. But we're not here to talk about volleyball, although we do love volleyball down here in Austin. But we're here to talk about football. It's been about 9, 10 months since we last saw the Longhorns in that 28-14 loss to the Buckeyes at the Cotton Bowl. Ohio State obviously went on, won the championship a couple days later. So, Stephen, I've got to ask you, being up in the Ohio area, what's the offseason been like? What's it been like covering a championship? Are people antsy? Are people still floating on cloud nine? Or have the Michigan fans shut up? Are they still talking smack about that win? What's been like offseason, a championship offseason?
Yeah, Michigan fans never shut up. Neither do Ohio State fans when they win that rivalry. So it's funny. You win a national championship. We've been talking about that for a couple of years, this idea of so what happens if one of these teams wins the national championship but also loses the rivalry game? Which do you put more of an emphasis on? And I just think it depends on your age demographic, which one maybe matters more there. But this offseason, obviously exciting for Ohio State. You kind of close that first chapter of the Ryan Day era with a national championship, despite all the ups and downs of what the last 4 or 5 years have been here, losing to Michigan, not necessarily getting over the hump, the Georgia game and whatnot. So to see that team get over the hump, there's obviously excitement about that. But I think around about June, you started to see fans start to get antsy and turn the page towards Texas like immediately. Ohio State in the program has been doing that since winter workout started because last year was last year, but this is a brand new team with a lot of new faces. There's only three returning starters on defense and maybe like two or three or four guys on offense returning. And so, yeah, there's some shiny names that everybody already knows, but Saturday in the shoot, there's going to be a lot of new stars born at Ohio State and probably Texas as well because both of these teams are kind of pressing the restart button a little bit.
You're talking about that just kind of, this is last year's last year, this year's this year. Going into the season, Ohio State's three in the AP poll, two in the coaches poll, Texas tops both. But once again, Ohio State's a defending champion. So is there a sense of disrespect up there in Columbus, or the players will say they don't care about the polls and all that stuff? What are the fans, what are people kind of saying about how the polls are kind of shaping up this season?
I don't think it's disrespect because of the rankings. I think it's more disrespect because of us and how we've talked about these two teams. It just feels like on one end of the spectrum, you've got a new five-star quarterback who's got limited experience, but his last name is Manning. And so every bit of hype that you could give a quarterback, Arch Manning is getting. And maybe some of that's well deserved, right? No one is expecting him to fall flat on his face on Saturday. But Ohio State's got a five-star quarterback too in Julian Sayin, who has just as much upside and probably should be getting just as much hype when you look at some of the weapons he's going to be throwing to. He's got Jeremiah Smith, the best player in college football. He's Caleb Downs on the other end of the ball as arguably the best defensive player in college football. Carnell Tate might be a first-round draft pick come April. Max Clare might be the best receiving tight end in college football by the end of this year, regardless of what his numbers are. But it's just both of these teams probably deserved unrealistic hype, crazy expectations, living in the fishbowl type of conversations. And it just seems like Texas, from an Ohio State fan perspective, they feel like Texas has gotten a lot of that anointment, while Ohio State, they just look at this roster and go, they lost 15, 16 players to the NFL draft. They're probably going to take a step back, even though that necessarily hasn't been the case at Ohio State for over 25 years.
You just mentioned Julian Sayin. Obviously, he won the quarterback battle. I think that was announced last week. Did that go as expected? Will Howard obviously did a lot of great things last season, but it's time for a new guy. Is he the quarterback that's going to kind of immediately lift this offense, or is he just kind of be conducting, passing it to those big names and kind of letting them do the work?
I think it's a gradual transition to get to the player he's going to be. He's going to be significantly better than Will Howard by the time it's all said and done. He is in the same line as CJ Stroud, Justin Fields, Dwayne Haskins in terms of Ryan Day is going to take this highly recruited guy and turn him into a first round draft pick. He's a little on the shorter side. He's about 6'1". So in comparison to Will Howard, 6'5", Kyle McCord and CJ Stroud and Justin Fields were all around 6'3", 6'4". Dwayne Haskins, 6'3", 6'4". He's a little bit on the shorter end of the spectrum in terms of Ryan Day's quarterbacks here, but he's got a super live arm. It was expected that he'd be the next starting quarterback. That's essentially been the case since he transferred in from Alabama, which comes with his own conversation. He was at Alabama for 2 weeks. That's not a guy who played at Alabama. He was there for bowl prep, and then his coach retired. But that's been necessarily the case for about a year and a half now that he was going to be the next starting quarterback, though Lincoln Keenholz, the backup this year as a third-year guy, maybe pushed him more than I think if you'd asked in January, most people anticipated him to push him, which I think is a good thing for where the room might be. But yeah, I don't expect Julian Sayin to come out on Saturday and look like, oh, that guy 100% is going to win the Heisman Trophy. That guy 100% is going to be the first pick in the draft in 2027. But I do expect to see signs, expect to see kind of similar to what we saw from CJ Stroud against Oregon in 2021, where it's a young quarterback in this environment for the first time. So maybe the first couple of weeks, it takes some time for him to get, kind of settled into that role. But I think by the time you see that Washington game later in the season, that Penn State game in November, if Julian Sayin is one of the five best quarterbacks in college football, that's not going to shock me.
We're recording this on a Monday earlier today. Your most recent Buckeye Talk podcast dropped, and in it, you and the guys are kind of talking about your predictions for the seasons, and you all think Ohio State is a top three seed, still kind of contending for a national championship. In your opinion, everyone here needs to go download and listen, but can you kind of give us a brief synopsis of why you believe that?
This is still one of the best rosters in college football. There's a lot of guys on this team who maybe you would have known about last year, but because so many guys put off the NFL and came back, there's a lot of guys who had to sit an extra year. Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry are very, very good defensive ends. In fact, Kenyatta Jackson breakout top 60 pick in the NFL draft wouldn't shock me. Bo Atkinson, the North Carolina transfer, he's a quality addition. He had 7.5 sacks last year. Can he build on that this year? I think the defensive tackle depth is still a bit of a question, but it's starting to build up. But I do think that top two of Caden McDonald and Edric Houston, they might arguably be the best defensive tackle tandem in the Big Ten, and this is an opportunity for them to flash. The strength of the defense, outside of obviously what Caleb Downs brings to the table, is that linebacker, though, with Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese. Those are some names that the world is going to know. I think Sonny may be a little bit more known because he's a 2-year starter already. But Arvell Reese, if you remember back in 2006, when Ohio State played Texas in Austin, James Laurinaitis, that was really his breakout. I've arrived. I might be the best linebacker in college football game. And now he's coaching the room. And I think he might be coaching a new version of him that's significantly more athletic, significantly larger, significantly faster. And his name is Arvell Reese. That's a name that I think everybody around the country needs to be paying attention to. It's number 8 on defense. While on offense, the offensive line isn't that new. I know that they lost Josh Simmons, but they lost Josh Simmons in the middle of the year last year. I know they lost Seth McLaughlin, but they lost him in the middle of the year last year. Guys like Carson Hinsman at center, Luke Montgomery, and Tegra Shabola in the interior, those were the guys who were out there in the college football playoff. Those were the guys playing. The tackles are new. We're expecting Austin Sarvelt, who played guard last year, to be their left tackle. And at right tackle, it's a bit of a battle going on between Philip Daniels and Ethan Nyawa, the two transfers, one from Rice and one from Minnesota. And then in the running back room, you lose Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins. But I think with James Peoples as a second-year guy who spent last year learning behind those two and then bringing in West Virginia transfer C.J. Donaldson along with freshman Bo Jackson, I think that room might be deeper than last year, even if last year maybe the upside talent because of how good those two were. And then the Ohio State wide receivers, I don't know if I need to go into detail about Ohio State wide receivers at this point. They got a kid by the name of Jeremiah Smith, who I guess he's pretty decent, so much so that Texas built their entire defense around stopping him for a game. But then Cardell Tate and Brandon Ennis might be the reasons why you might not be able to do that this year. But like again, this is a loaded football team. It's just because so many guys came back last year, these guys didn't have to step into these roles, and now they get to do so. It's just they have to do so against the number one team in the country to start the year.
Let me ask. I was going to ask, about a name to know on this defense that lost a lot of talent and has a new DC, but you mentioned a few good guys. So I got to ask. Last year, this Ohio State defense was incredible, as Texas fans found out in the Cotton Bowl. Is it fair to say this year's version is going to be just as good, or what do you kind of expect from this defense?
Who statistically, that's a hard case to make, right? And whenever you're under 4.2 yards allowed per play, that's when it gets hard to sustain that. I think it's going to look different. I think it's more athletic. I think outside of just the front four, I think Matt Patricia coming in and taking over the defense with the stuff he was doing in New England with Bill Belichick, the multiple looks. I think we're going to just see a lot more guys be involved, a lot more packages. To say it's going to be as good or better, I think it's too early to tell because those guys had mastered Jim Knowles' system. They've been playing in it for 3 years. If Texas scores 27 points on Saturday, I don't think people should be like, "Oh no, Ohio State's defense is not nearly as good as it was last year." It's going to be more because Texas is very much that good. There's a reason they're the number one team in the country. It's going to look different, but I think it has the chance to be just as effective by the time we get to the end of the year and things really get rolling.
And obviously, this game nationwide is going to grab a lot of attention, a lot of headlines, big noon kickoff, all that stuff. One versus three or one versus two. But do Ohio State fans care about this game? You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, Penn State's coming to Columbus later in the year. Michigan, that's the game everyone has circled, and that's in Ann Arbor this year. Does this game really, is this game are people as excited in Columbus about this game as people are around the country?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And part of it is because of the way it's been talked about around the country, but it's also, I mean, it's two of the most historic programs in college football, right? I think this is the second most important game on the schedule behind obviously that game at the end of the season, right? That's always the most important one. I think fans might care about this game more than the Penn State game. The Penn State game has more significance to it now because their defensive coordinator left for Penn State, right? But Penn State hasn't proven the ability to beat Ohio State at all in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years here, especially since Ryan Day took over the program. This might be a national championship preview, right? If these two teams are meeting again in Miami on January 19th or 18th, I don't think anybody would be shocked. And so I think that is more intriguing. Unfortunately, it's at noon, which I don't know if you know or not, Ohio State fans are sick of playing at noon all the time. So maybe the glitz and glamour of the night game, like we saw in 2022 when they played Notre Dame in a top five matchup, might not be there. But trust and believe, Ohio State fans have spent the better half of the last month ready to get on the field with Texas again because again, these teams have played 4 times already and no one's won back-to-back games, and this is an opportunity to do so.
Well, last question I have for you before we get you out of here. You've been very gracious with your time today, but last year Texas fans got to go to the big house, and that was a pretty cool environment until fans kind of cleared out around halftime. But this time around, what should fans expect from the shoe? Texas obviously went there 20 years ago, but this is kind of a new generation of Texas fans. So
Yeah.
some people are going to be getting their first experience. What should we expect on Saturday?
It gets pretty loud in there, especially when the moment calls for it. And I think Ross Bjork, the new athletic director, who's been on the job for about a year, has been coming up with some new ideas to kind of add to that. Right? They have these things called V towels. I don't know if the Steelers' terrible towels are kind of like that, but they're scarlet. There's environmental things they're starting to do to maybe create a better environment for college football. But it gets loud. It's I like an Ohio Stadium to being a New York Knick playing in Madison Square Garden. They are 100% into the game. They also will tell you if you are not doing the things that you're supposed to do on the field to make them happy. And so it's a fun environment to play in. It can be a raucous environment, especially in top five matchups. And so I think any worry that the environment's going to be flat because it's at noon or whatever else. That's not going to exist in this game. This is number one versus number three in a rematch of a college football playoff semifinal, maybe a preview of this year's national championship game. And you got Arch Manning versus Julian Sayin. What more could you want?
Steve, well, we appreciate the time. This is Stephen Means, Cleveland.com. Go check out his work there. Buckeye Talk Podcast. Go download and listen as you get ready for this game on Saturday. This is Danny Davis of the Longhorn Confidential. We'll see y'all down the road. Peace.